Bronze Tablet is going to be a fucking roller coaster if you haven't heard of this card. And we have a lot to talk about with it, so let's get this fucking show on the road. Bronze Tablet is an artifact that costs 6 mana. It's a mono artifact, which is an obsolete term that means you have to tap the card to activate it. So you can pay 4 mana and tap Bronze Tablet, and target any card opponent has in play. Remove it and Bronze Tablet from the game. You become owner of that card, and your opponent becomes owner of Bronze Tablet. Exchange is permanent. Play as Interrupt. Opponent can prevent exchange by spending 10 life. This discards Bronze Tablet. Damage preventing effects cannot counter such loss of life. Bronze Tablet comes into play tapped. Remove this card from your deck if not playing for Ante. Did you catch all that? Was the horrible fucking templating keeping you from understanding what the fuck this does? I'm gonna read the errata text here because it's kind of a mess. Remove this card from your deck before playing if not playing for Ante. This artifact enters tapped. You can pay 4 mana and tap Bronze Tablet. Exile this artifact and target non-token permanent an opponent owns. That player may pay 10 life. If they do, put this card into its owner's graveyard. Otherwise, that player owns this card and you own the other exiled card. So that's kind of wild. If you're still struggling, you can pay 4 mana and tap this card to trade one of their permanents for Bronze Tablet. Both of them get exiled so they aren't part of the game anymore, but you get to keep that card and then they keep Bronze Tablet. That's fucking insane. At least this comes into play tapped. Imagine seeing this card for the first time when it gets cast on you. That would be a wild fucking experience. But before we get too far, Ante, have you heard of it? I know a lot of you watching have heard of Ante and have even played with it probably, but if you're newer, it's possible you didn't even know this existed. So let's take a moment to talk about what Ante is and why it even existed. So Ante is, I guess you'd call it a game variant, and if you are playing for Ante, 2 main things happen. 1, cards that must be removed from your deck if you aren't playing for Ante can be included, obviously. And when you start a game with Ante, you remove the top card of your deck and put it into the Ante zone. Whoever wins the game gets all of the cards in the Ante zone for keeps. Overall, Ante isn't and never was popular, and other than some hardened enthusiasts, it never really saw much play because losing a card out of your deck is a pretty visceral thing. I am going to defend Ante a little bit here and give some context around why they thought it was a good idea to begin with. Ante is undoubtedly a bad execution, but its goals were actually pretty noble. As Magic was the first trading card game ever, some misconceptions were originally held about how the game would be played. The major misconception was just how many cards players would have access to. Richard never expected people to ever buy more cards than maybe a starter deck and a handful of packs. And maybe the one guy with more money than sense would buy a whole box. Partially because of this misconception, Richard was worried that players wouldn't trade their cards, and he really wanted each player's deck to be a living, breathing thing that changed over time. Sometimes you would have a powerful deck, and sometimes you'd barely have enough to scrape together. But the main vision is that groups of people, mostly like D&D groups and stuff like that, would each get enough cards to play, and as they played together, their cards would change hands and decks would evolve over time, and every once in a while, each kind of group's personal meta would be shifted a little bit when they would go to a game store or to a convention and play with other people, and then they would see cards that they had never seen before, exchange, maybe do a bit of trading, and then their personal groups would be exposed to new cards that would then exchange hands and stuff like that. Richard was also, let's say, optimistic that Ante would help balance play. The idea was that if you had better cards in your deck than me, if you beat me, you would get worse cards, making your deck weaker. But if I beat you, I would get better cards, balancing out the meta. This of course ignores the idea that you could just not put my bad cards into your deck, And it also just ignores just how brutally optimized a deck could even be in the first place if you manage to get a hold of really powerful cards. This is not how things played out. But you need to remember that Magic wasn't a competitive game at the time. There wasn't even a 4 of rule at the time. It was really just expected that groups would be playing 40 to 85 card decks full of random cards, and that's what the game would be. The idea of optimization wasn't too far down the road, but it wasn't seen as inevitable when these decisions were made. He also got the idea for Ante from marbles, which is actually heavily influenced the idea for Magic. I guess people played marbles for Ante. I don't know. A little old for my blood, but anyway, in summary, Ante was meant to keep decks fresh and interesting, and also to act as a balancing mechanism. That didn't really pan out, but I do really want to defend the concept here, because if you look at it from a modern view, it's a terrible fucking idea. But it came from a good place. It didn't work out and they abandoned it pretty quickly, but it was, the original idea for it was to make the game better. Now, Bronze Tablet is especially interesting compared to most other Ante cards, because it doesn't interact with the Ante Zone at all, and most of the Ante cards do in some way mess with the Ante Zone. This card literally just exchanges itself for any permanent that they have in play. What I find really interesting about this design personally is that it kind of breaks away from the philosophy of Ante cards and the philosophy of the game. What I mean is that Bronze Tablet doesn't actually help you win the game you're using it in, it helps you win other games by gaining a powerful card from your opponent. Or it helps you make money by taking an incredibly valuable card from your opponent. But it costs you 10 mana to do this. The only in-game benefit that this card has is that it either burns them for 10 life or it removes 1 permanent. Now, spending 10 mana over 2 turns to make them lose 10 life is not the worst exchange rate, but it is certainly not the most efficient thing to be doing. And spending 10 mana to remove 1 permanent is generally not worth it, unless you get to keep that permanent, and then it might be. I just find it really interesting that this card seems to lean into the idea that some cards are more valuable than others. Still, it might not be that deep, and this card could just exist because someone thought it was a cool concept to make a card that made you trade during a game. And to be fair, the idea is definitely interesting, and if some cards didn't have the value of a small house, this idea would be more funny and acceptable. Moving right along, the rulings for this card are also fucking insane. This card is a fucking trip no matter how you look at it. For example, if you make a copy of Bronze Tablet with something like a copy artifact, the copy artifact gets traded away when you activate the Bronze Tablet. Well, when you activate the copy artifact version of the Bronze Tablet. That does make sense. That, I think, is a fair ruling. The next ruling is more of a clarification, I would say, but I guess that's what all rulings are. So you can't choose to pay 10 life if you do not have at least 10 life. And that seems like bad and like not okay, but you can always concede in response at like any point of this exchange, and it has roughly the same effect of paying the 10 life. And that one's not too crazy either. The next one is just really fucking funny, but you can use something like Steal Artifact or Aladdin to steal their Bronze Tablet, then you can activate their Bronze Tablet, steal something on their side of the field, and they'll get their Bronze Tablet back, and you get their other card for free. That's really fucking funny, and you know what they say, turnabout is always fair play. Fuck, that's funny. Also, if you blow up your own permanent as the Bronze Tablet's ability is attempting to resolve, the ability will fizzle, meaning the Bronze Tablet will stay in play, but it'll be tapped. I guess that's kind of interesting. However, the coolest and funniest and most depraved ruling is the last one, and if you've been watching me for a while, you might know where this is going. If the tablet is not still on the battlefield when the ability resolves, it is not exiled. The other player still has the choice to pay 10 life, and you still become the owner of their card if they choose not to do so. So yeah, basically, if you activate your Bronze Tablet, and then use, say, a boomerang on your bronze tablet before the ability has a chance to resolve, the ability doesn't actually care. If your opponent doesn't pay the 10 life, bounce their thing, or concede the game in response, then the bronze tablet is back in your hand and ready to be deployed, and their card is exiled, with you as the owner of that card. That's kind of wild. And if you're really interested in seeing what this means, I actually have a whole video where I abuse this, let's call it a kink in the rules, because it's not like a bug or anything. This is technically how the rules function. It's just kind of weird. But anyways, I used that technique in a video on Chandelar to steal practically every permanent from an AI game. That's really funny and kind of interesting, and you can watch that video if you want to see exactly like all the nuances behind doing that. I will warn you, before you start fantasizing about picking up a 4th edition version of this card for less than $1 and convincing your friends to play a game of Ante, this ruling doesn't actually matter in like a real game versus real people with human brains, because you can concede at any point. So you can just concede in response to them attempting to do this, or you know, you could like just win the fucking game while they're fucking around. This is really mana intensive, and you can definitely build a deck that's pretty optimized to do this sort of thing, but then you're not like doing any of the things that actually win a game. And like, unless you're playing against literally a Chandelar AI, this is just never gonna fucking fly. Nobody is gonna sit across from you at a game store while you take 20-minute turns stealing all their permanents. So while the concept of this ruling is funny as fuck, in practice, it's also just funny as fuck. But this never actually plays out like you might initially think when you read that and go, oh my fucking god. I feel like I've been talking too long. Is there really anything else to say? I explained Ante, how to break this card, what the card does. But yeah, I guess that's really all I have for you today. So let's check out the art. Bronze Tablet was illustrated by Tom Varnerstrand, and it's definitely not his most impressive of flashy pieces, but I do kind of like the simplicity of the piece and the subtle details. The little puddle that's sitting under the tablet is pretty cool, and this illustration manages to feel almost three-dimensional to me. Like I said, the subject matter is a little dull, and there isn't anything super impressive here, but it's still really nice, and there's something almost mundane about this art that I just really appreciate. I think it really helps kind of the like feeling of Magic to have stuff like this that's less fantastical. But yeah, I think it's pretty cool. But that is the only art we have to talk about for Bronze Tablet. I can't believe Bronze Tablet wasn't a part of the SpongeBob Secret Lair, or the Furby's Secret Lair, or the whatever else they're doing. But maybe someday we'll get a Bronze Tablet Secret Lair. A guy can dream. Yeah, okay. That's all I have for you today, and I hope you enjoyed this brief history lesson into one of the more unhinged cards in Magic's history. I am gonna assume that most of you watching probably didn't play much Ante and treated these cards more as a curiosity than anything else, but if you played for Ante back in the day, hearing about it would be really cool. But even if you didn't play with this, I'd still like to hear your thoughts. And remember, not every comment has to be full of historical context and brilliance. Sometimes you can just laugh at something or say that's pretty cool. I guess my point here is I'm trying to say is don't be discouraged from commenting if you want to and don't really have anything you feel is valuable to say. It's still nice to see the comments. But yeah, otherwise, as always, you can like the video if you liked it. You can subscribe if you give a shit, but either way, I hope you have a magical day. Thank you for watching.